Okay, Jonathan. I'm referring to Jonathan Sinton. We have two Jonathans now. So this is it. We're ready. So everyone is online. So whenever you like, take the floor, please.
Right. Well, not much to say. I'll reserve my remarks until later. Jonathan Walters. I think a man who needs no introduction to most. A principal, I believe, at Castalia, longtime member of the energy team at the World Bank, and well known in CSP circles. Jonathan, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. Let me silence that phone. Thank you very much for the introduction. I think this is a great panel on the way forward in CSP and MENA. We have 4 of the countries represented: Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, and Tunisia, and very strong representation from each. I think this panel discussion is extremely timely, really for 2 reasons. One is we're coming to the end of the MENA CSP Knowledge and Innovation Program, the MENA CSP KIP. So it gives the countries an opportunity to tell us how the KIP helped them in formulating their CSP plans. Was there something that the KIP could have done better? And in fact, what are their CSP plans going forward? And obviously that differs a lot from country to country, but it'd be very interesting to hear about that. That's one of the reasons why this is a very timely discussion. I think the other reason it's timely is a less happy reason, which is, you know, we're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic and the economic damage that is being caused by that pandemic, and we need to look forward to when a recovery from that economic damage becomes possible, whenever that is, hopefully sooner rather than later. And then what role investing in different technologies will play in that recovery. Will it be a recovery that just, you know, rebuilds with old technologies, or a recovery that looks forward to newer technologies, to technologies that are becoming both cheaper and greener? And that's an issue that maybe the panelists could comment on briefly, but also other members of the audience, particularly from development banks who are trying to formulate their strategy on the post-COVID-19 recovery. It would be interesting to hear from them. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists in turn to make their remarks, make their presentations. Maybe each of you could start by introducing yourselves and your organization, starting with Murad Al-Omari from NEPCO in Jordan. Please, Murad.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be among you today and to present the situation of the electricity sector here in Jordan and what could be the need for the near future. Yeah. So first of all, so this is me, Murad Al-Omari. I'm acting as the head of the generation planning section here in NEPCO. And before that, joined NEPCO maybe 11, 12 years ago. I started with the IBB business and the IBB development. So we are here in NEPCO. We're responsible to be the transmission system network provider, the transmission system operator as well, and the single buyer. So we plan to the system in terms of the generation and in terms of the transmission as well. May I start with my presentation? I'm wondering if everybody can see the presentation right now.
Yes.
Yeah. So the presentation will be discussing the Jordanian electrical system and somehow going into some parts to the discussing some of the CSP aspects and the MENA MENA Select project. So first of all, I'd like to have some introduction to the electricity sector here in Jordan. So as you can see to the upper part to the left, that the energy consumption development in the country since the year 2005. As we can see, I mean, in the last decades, we have like a dramatic increase of consumption for the electricity, maybe more than 5% per year. But what happens in the last 3 years? Maybe almost the demand being constant for those years. The reason behind is that implementing the rooftop projects for some of the customers so they can cover their demands by their own rooftop generation. Otherwise, maybe the country, I mean, practice some of the lack of the economy as well. So these are the reasons behind. The classification of these demand usually in Jordan, the majority of the load is kind of domestic or residential. So this counts to almost 40%. So we're not, for example, following like the European country where the demand is almost, the majority is kind of the industrial demands as well. This also, makes higher uncertainty in the projection of the demand because the most part of the demand is domestic. So usually domestic, it's not easy to predict the behavior and the projection of the demand for the near future. Usually the water, the industrial sector, as well the commercial sector is much easier to predict. It's not easier to forecast the behavior of the demand. Coming to the installed capacity of the system, going back like 16 years ago, the total installed capacity of the system is almost 2 gigawatt. Now the capacity of the system is more than 5,000 megawatt, and this is, we still have some kind of committed project, so we're expecting to reach more than 6 gigawatt. And compared to the peak load that we have, we recorded this year almost 3.4 gigawatt. So the country has exercising the excess energy, exercising, the huge reserve that we have in the system. So we're challenging having less utilization factor of some of the power plant because of this huge reserve that we have in the system currently. As a part of the economy, so Jordan spent around 17 of its GDP to cover and meet the cost of the energy to the customers. And here in Jordan, we're basically following the structure of the single buyer model. So NEPCO here, as we said before, the single buyer system operator. So we are the off-taker of the electricity. We have the conventional power plant as well as the renewable power plant. So NEPCO is the only company that purchased the energy from these generation plants, then sold out to the distribution companies as well to the bulk customers. This is the annual generation profile of the country. So this is the development that we have in the demand. For example, in the previous years, we used to have the peak load for example, in the summertime, but currently the peak load that we have is the night peak load. So this is what we said before. From year to year, we have some challenging in predicting the load profile in the country, because again, mostly the load is kind of domestic or residential. So it's not easy to predict for us. According, to our econometric approach for the demand profile in Jordan, so we're following the linear regression to predict what would be the demand. So as the medium scenario, what we predict right now is almost around 1.8%. But again, this is not a flat rate of growth. For example, we are now practicing more than this rate for the night load, for the winter loads, because of the heating loads, of course. And we have less than this rate, for the daytime, especially in the summer and the spring, because of the high PV that we have at the demand side. So because of high penetration that we have currently from the renewable energy, so our interest area is not longer that as the previous is what is the peak and what's the value, if the curve is flat or not. So again, we have a new challenge. What's the ramping of the curve because of these renewable? So this is a new challenge for the system. For example, in 2018, as you can see, for example, in the spring, so we have like 300 megawatt increment in the load that we have to face in 1 hour. So this is very challenging, to the system. This put the system that the system, will need for higher reserve, to satisfy these kind of demand and changing between the loads itself. So as we said before, we have now plenty of generation. Peak load is almost 3.4 gigawatt. So looking at the reserve margin of the system, so we can see for the summer and the winter, so we see, for example, that the system is still have good potential of the reserve margin for the coming years, at least up to the year 2027. So until the year 2027, the system will have and preserve good reserve margin to satisfy the demands. So here in NEPCO, we built our generation development plan by evaluating, of course, the prerequisites of the electricity demand forecast, the fuel contracts, the obligation, for example, take or pay, and the other conditions, and the costing as well. This is in order, of course, to find the optimal mixture of the new build and the retirement that finally minimize the system cost over the coming planning horizon years. So in the country, we're using the Plexus tool as a software to model and have the optimization for the system. Because of the high renewable energy what we have currently in the system, we have to look carefully nowadays to some of the reliability indices in the system. So this is a very challenging one. Here, what we have is the very fluctuated renewable energy profile that we have in the system, which makes the system and the prediction to the system very hard. Planning to the system now is getting not easy because of that. So we'll have almost more than 2.2 gigawatt of renewable energy that integrated to the system. So we have to deal with this. We have to deal with these variable and fluctuated kind of generation. So these kind of sample profile for the system for the year 2025 for different season, of course. So we can see that the system is practiced in the red, like this is an excess energy, this is curtailed energy, this kind of waste energy that the system can't utilize. Why? Because we have high penetration that are coming from the PV during the noon time, and the conventional power plant we have in the system, they don't have all the flexibility. They are not a flexible generation in terms of the switching on and the switching off. So for different seasons, we'll have this curtailment, but with different amount. The maximum amount would be in the spring because of the high ramping of the PV. So this is basically because of the weather condition that makes the high ramping of the PV before the noon time. So for example, in the year 2030, I mean, the system will keep practice this kind of curtailment. But for example, if we implement such a new technology, for example, in the year 2028, 2029, with kind of flexible generation, load follower power plants, battery storage, pump hydro storage. So this will enhance the efficiency of the system to decrease this amount of the curtailed energy in the system. So these are samples of the year 2030. So I captured this slide from another presentation. This is an operational study, I mean, done for the system by a third party. This is done by Chesi, one of the lead international company in this regard, which shows what would be the amount of curtailment to the system. For example, in the year 2025, maybe the amount of renewable energy that would be curtailed can reach up to the 24%. So this makes us, I mean, to start think about, you know, these storage techniques and technologies available in the market, like the battery storage, like the hydro, in order, you know, to utilize this amount of the energy that the system would have be curtailed. So coming back to the MENA CSP project, so appreciately, I mean, the project is done by the World Bank and their consultant. So the phases of this project were first of all modeling the potential for the Jordan in terms of the CSP, what would be the potential, then preparing the framework for that technology, and the third stage is the decision to go ahead or not for such a project. So Jordan, yes, of course, yes, one of the countries that enjoying the high direct normal irradiation in the world. And the map to the right, it can show that maybe the DNI in Jordan can reach up to, in some places in the southern part of the country, can reach up to the 2,800 kilowatt hour per square meters. So this is, yes, we believe this is an huge potential, and this would increase the visibility of such a project in the region. But again, the challenge, I mean, the requirement of the demand, and how is the demand is behaved in the system. The other challenge, the huge PV that we have in the system. I mean, maybe the PV by the year 2025, plus to the wind energy, will count to around 2.5 gigawatt. And in some days, this, I mean, will exceed the load itself. So, I mean, this is not easy, I mean, to deal with. The process or the workflow that done through this CSP KIP MENA project, this is quite similar that we did in our generation development plan, like demand profile, then the site constraints, other constraints of the grid, for example, then go to the modeling, then to design, then get the results, CapEx, OpEx, and finally levelized cost of energy, and etc. But again, the issue here, I mean, that yeah, we receive this kind of studies. Also, we're feeding with other such kind of studies from other NGOs in the world, maybe sometimes from the EU for the pump hydro storage, for the battery storage, the CSP. So thankfully we combine all of these studies, and they make it as an input to our NEPCO master plan. So in the master plan, yes, we can judge what would be the optimum expansion to the country. So what I can say, I mean, for the electricity future in Jordan right now, yes, we need to keep assessing all kind of technology. So this is based on the development and the projection of the prices in the market. And of course, CSP is always one of these potential technologies and candidates. We also need to monitor the demand profile, what would be the development of the peak and valleys of the profile itself. And we don't forget that the country has some long-term obligation for the natural gas contract we have to meet. And we have to deal with and trade with the curtailed excess energy that the system is exercised right now. And this is subjected to be more in the coming future. Other parameters that we have to look at and other criteria, maybe this was not taken in more details in the previous, but now we have to, because of the high renewable energy, the high fluctuation that we have, is the reliability and dynamic assessment to the system itself. So that's all that what I can share. I mean, for the electricity profile now in Jordan. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Murad, for giving us an overview of the situation in Jordan. I'm sure there'll be quite a few questions about Jordan in the Q&A session at the end. In fact, I'm seeing already in the Q&A box, there's quite a few questions. You might want to take a look at the Q&A box. In fact, all the panelists might want to look while you're not speaking to see what's coming. And I would encourage everybody in the audience to pose questions in the Q&A box. Can I now pass to Sorina Mortada from Lebanon? Sorina, if you could perhaps introduce yourself and LCEC with a few words and then make your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Sorina Mortada. I'm a technical consultant at the Lebanese Center for Energy Conservation. The LCEC actually is the National Energy Agency in Lebanon. Our main vision and mission relies on having action plans for renewable energy and energy efficiency. This is the LCEC. I'm here to talk about the CSP. So I'm going to share my presentation. Can you see it? Yeah. Okay. So this presentation is about the CSP potential in Lebanon and the first request for proposal that we have launched recently in September 2019 about consultancy services to develop a concentrated solar power plant in the Lebanese region, Hermel region in the northeast of Lebanon. So first of all, I'm going to give you a small overview about the challenges in the Lebanese electricity sector. So the figures you see here are of the year 2010. This is the baseline we have adopted for our plans, the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan 2016-2020 and the National Renewable Energy Action Plan 2016 and 2020. So definitely this is going to be updated soon for a new and recent year. So as you can see in this figure, Lebanon imports most of its primary energy. More than 96.8% were imported in 2010. The second, which causes a problem, of course, of energy security. The second problem is we have shortages in electricity. So as you can see in this figure, in 2010, the electricity demand was around 16,000 gigawatt hour, whereas the electricity generated by the Lebanese utility, which is EDL, was around 12,000 gigawatt hours. So basically, this shortage usually is overcome by the private generators. So in Lebanon, in each neighborhood, we have private generators in order to have electricity whenever EDL is not generating it. So these all these problems, from one side the energy security, from the second side the electricity demand and the shortage between the supply and demand, led us to of course develop our national renewable energy action plan. The first one was for the years 2010-2015, and the second one, which is shown here, some of the capacities are shown in this slide, are for the years 2016-2020. As you can see, we have tried to diversify the technologies. So we have, our target is for wind 200 megawatt, for PV 150, for distributed PV 100 megawatt, and for the CSP we had a target of 50 megawatt to be installed by 2020. So now we are updating, of course, our national renewable energy action plan, and the new target, the first target was to have 12% of renewable energy in the total Lebanese energy mix, whereas our new target for 2030 is to have 30% of renewable energy only from the electricity that would be consumed in 2030. So when we are working on the update, we have done a study with the IRENA about Lebanon outlook and how to map our renewable energy in 2030. So our target will remain 100 megawatt for the 2030 in CSP, of course. So the CSP plant, why would Lebanon think about CSP? Definitely because of the energy storage. So the energy storage will help us to cover the peak demand, will help us to deliver electricity on demand, and also to reduce the electricity deficit. As some key numbers, this study is a bit old. It was done by UNDP CIDRO project. The study concluded that the levelized cost of energy for a 50 megawatt power plant with 7.5 hours of storage is approximately 16 US cents per kilowatt hour. So if we compare this LCOE with our existing power plants, conventional ones, and specifically two power plants that should be working on gas, in Tir and Baalbek, the cost of generation there is around 32 US cents per kilowatt hour. So as a rough idea and rough estimation, we can say that if we replace one of these two plants or both plants with the CSP, with thermal storage, of course, we can have a yearly savings of around 27 million USDs, and the payback period would be around 11 years. The impacts, of course, the direct impacts are the additional supply with the 50 megawatt and 7.5 hours of storage, additional supply of 170 gigawatt hours, of course, to avoid CO2 emissions and to decrease our dependency on fossil fuels. As for the indirect impacts, of course, to increase the employment rate, especially in the region of Hermel. I'm going to show the map in the next slide. To increase the Lebanese expertise and to increase to a small extent the economic development. So why we are talking about the Hermel region? Actually, if you can see in the map, it's in the red circle. The Hermel region is in the northeast part of Lebanon. It has a suitable climate because it's a bit like a semi-desert area. We have a connection to the transmission network. It's already there. The normal irradiation are about 200 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. So it's among the highest in Lebanon. So we can benefit from the lower irradiation for PV generation, solar PV electricity generated, and from the higher irradiation for the CSP. And of course, in this region, we have a river which would allow to supply the CSP plant with the required cooling water. So what we in last year, we had several discussions with the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, RVO, in order to launch a study about the feasibility of a CSP plant in Lebanon, and specifically in this region. So we have an in-kind contribution of around 580,000 euros that will be used for this study. We have launched the RFP during the Beirut Energy Forum in September 2019. The study will be undertaken in 2 phases. So the total duration of the project is 14 months. The first phase is about studying the technical aspect of the CSP with at least 50 megawatt installed capacity and 7.5 hours of storage, and to propose several alternatives specifically for the storage and if we can increase this capacity or not. So the first part is technical. The duration is about 9 months. And the second part, if the first part says that it's feasible to have CSP, we can then move to the second stage of the project, which is to have a fully environmental and social impact assessment for this plant, or for the solutions that might be as a result of this study. So as I said, we have two phases. The first one, the feasibility and technical studies, financial, economic analysis. And the second phase would be the fully environmental and social impact assessment. The bidder or the contractor should also propose tender documentations, because if this study says that it's feasible to implement CSP in this region with a certain capacity and a certain storage system, then we are going to implement the proposed solution. Regarding the evaluation system for this RFP, for this request for proposal, first of all, we are adopting our procedure of procurement at the ministry. We have the first stage as administrative and technical checkup of the documentation. The second phase is the capability and technical scoring over 1,000. If the bidder has a score lower than 650, it's gonna fail. More than 650, it will move to the financial offer comparison. So till now, as I said, we have launched the RFP in September 2019. We gave a first, the deadline was December 26, 2019 for submitting the proposals. We have received 6 proposals. These proposals are under evaluation, and hopefully results will be disseminated soon, at least for the first part, which is the technical evaluation. And later on, we are going to open the offers in order to choose the winning bidder, or to announce the winning bidder. So this is all about the first experience of CSP in the Lebanese context. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Serena, for telling us about the situation in Lebanon with CSP that's obviously moving forward. You're already getting some questions in the Q&A box. Those questions are focusing really on the cost issue. And as you mentioned in your presentation, the number you quoted for CSP came from a study that's now a few years old, and your new study is meant to update those numbers. I think 16 cents per kilowatt hour is now a very high number for CSP. I mean, we had Paddy Padmanathan earlier in the conference talking about 5 cent CSP electricity in the MENA region, which would be wonderful to see. We've had the Dubai project at 7.3 cents a kilowatt hour. So you will get questions about cost, both about the cost of CSP, but also you compared it to the very high cost of conventional thermal, some of the conventional thermal plants in Lebanon. So you're getting questions about why are those costs so high. At this point, let me pass to Abderrahim Jamrani from Mazen in Morocco. Morocco, of course, has huge experience with CSP over the last 9 or 10 years. So Abderrahim, please briefly introduce yourself, introduce Mazen, and then go ahead with your presentation. Thank you. I think you're still on mute.
Oh, yeah. Okay, do you hear me? Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody, and I hope that you are all doing well during this period. I am Abdurrahman Jimrani. I am the technical director of Mazen. I will try to present the strategy that has been taken by Mazen during the last 10 years in developing renewables, of course, concentrating on CSP, more on CSP, which is the object of the conference. Let me share my presentation. Okay. Okay, do you have the presentation? Okay, so first I would like to present who is Mazen and what are we doing in Morocco. Mazen in the Moroccan is the Moroccan Agency for Sustainable Energy. Mazen was created by 2010 in order to develop solar energy in Morocco. At this time, it was the Moroccan Agency for Solar Energy. And the first project we had began with was the solar complex. I will present it just after. But by 2016, Mazen was charged by the Moroccan government of all renewable energies developments and operation. So Mazen is now the renewable energy developer in Morocco, from of the government, of course, or the public one, as private companies can also develop renewables in Morocco. The Moroccan objectives of renewables were stated by 2009 to 42% of renewables installed capacity in the mix, the Moroccan mix. At that time, the renewables represented about 28%. And then by 2015, during COP21, Morocco has upgraded the objectives that was stated to 52% to be reached by 2030. For these, Mazen has, for example, the objective to reach at least 3,000 megawatt to be installed between 2016 and 2020, and 6,000 megawatt to be installed between 2020 and 2030, without taking into account all the what the private company will have to install during this period. Well, how did we define the solutions to be developed in Morocco? From the beginning, in Mazen, we decided that the objective is to respond demand, and the objective is to respond the best way demand. So the comparison of technologies was not just comparing the technologies between them only, but also taking into account what will be the response to demand, and what will be the grid win with any solution. Of course, wind was being developed before, about 10 years before, but for solar, Morocco decided from the beginning to develop CSP, because CSP allowed us first to have generation by night after sunset, which corresponded to our needs, which was 5 hours peak, 5 hours of peak just after sunset, and the cost of electricity during these 5 hours was very, very high by 2010, and continue to be high anyway, even today, because we are using the more expensive means to generate electricity during these periods. So the decision for Nur-1, which was the first power plant of the solar, the Ouarzazate Noor complex, it is it is this. Sorry, I think I don't. It is this one, the first one on the bottom. We chose 3 hours because we thought that storage will have a cost, like it is the case now in batteries, and will cost more if we are using more storage. When during the learning of studying a lot of cases of CSP power plants, we understood that when we are storing more, we are using more our steam turbine, which has a huge cost in the system, and the cost is declining. So you have to generate more electricity from storage in order to, with CSP, in order to reduce the cost, and the cost will not increase when you are using more storage. Why 5 hours in the 5 hours in Morocco? Just because during off-peak hours between midnight and 7 in the morning, demand is so low though that we didn't need more capacity. That's all. Else, we were sure to have electricity with lower cost between if we are increasing the storage capacity. So in that, for this complex, the Noor-1 was 160 megawatt 3 hours. That was under operation by 2016, the beginning of 2016. And then after, for Noor-2 and Noor-3, which has a parabolic trough and a tower, we let it just open to developers to propose what they want to optimize themselves the storage. That we just fixed it to be more than 3 hours, and we limited. We could not use, of course, electricity between midnight and 7 in the morning, and they all proposed 7 hours of storage capacity. If we were sure, if, as I said, if we let it open to 7 between midnight and 7 in the morning, we could have even 12 or 15 hours storage capacity. The fourth plant in Ouarzazate is a PV power plant. I will not detail it more, just to say that the Noor Ouarzazate complex is 580 megawatt installed capacity, with some thousands of gigawatt hours storage capacity. When evolving and between, by let's say 2015, the cost of PV was declining fast, while the cost of CSP was declining, but not at the same way. And we understood that we can use CSP during night, thanks to storage, while using PV during day. And with this result, we launched the Noor-Midelt, and a PV CSP hybrid power plant. The RFP has been opened, and we are now closing the first power plant. The cost was reduced by 50% between Noor Ouarzazate and Noor-Midelt. We are already reaching, let's say, about 6 to 6.5 cents per kilowatt hour for such power plant. Just to say, when we are comparing PV, CSP, wind, hydro, we forgot that in the last century, during the last century, we could not use only nuclear or only coal or only fuel or only gas for electricity. We need the mix. We need them together, because we have to respond a demand that is not flat, that is not having a single view. It will be the same thing for the future in our point of view, and I think it was also presented in the first session. of this conference, we will not mix. And now what we are doing, we are adding PV and wind, more PV and wind and more PV and wind to an existing system. And you can see on the left, on the bottom, this curve that demonstrates how it is difficult for all these means to work with coal that is being reducing their capacity, or gas and so on, or we will have to curtail PV or wind in order to make them working together. So we cannot have, in our point of view, the two systems working a lot of time together. Until now, renewables are not well developed else in some countries, and it can continue to work. But in some years, it will not be able to work. And even you can see it in, for example, in Italy or in Germany during summer. Some years they have to cut or to curtail coal or PV. So we will have to construct a new mix in our point of view, and this new mix will, of course, it is clear that wind and PV, and I think that nobody is discussing it, will give the maximum of energy. I'm talking about energy, not about capacity, because the energy, it is the energy with the lowest cost, but not the capacity. For the capacity, we will need more. We tried in Morocco also to make a study to see what will happen with PV and wind. I will not be long. It is just that there are synergies. We are maximizing what we call useful energy using PV and wind, but it is not sufficient. We will never be able to respond whole demand with only PV and wind. And in Morocco and in a lot of our regions in MENA and even in some countries in Africa, we can use hydro to compensate the needs of wind and PV, but we don't have enough hydro in our region. So we will need more technologies to complete the mix. We think also, of course, to storage, and storage can be of everybody knows the known technologies. Let's say the hydro pumped storage. Well, you need sites, and everybody will convince that, yeah, the cost is very interesting. The thermal storage with CSP, which is a solution, batteries, of course, and why not hydrogen in the future? Not now, but in 10 years, in 15 years, hydrogen can be a solution for seasonal intermittencies. Batteries are not, batteries, thermal storage, and hydro pumped are not, in our point of view, also in competition. Batteries can respond demand for stabilizing frequency for 1 hour and a half, 2 hours storage needed, while thermal storage, you can use it from 5 to 15, even to 20 hours storage capacity without any problem. The storage does not cost a lot, which is the cost is in the steam turbine and not in the storage itself. And hydro pumped storage also, of course, as I said, when you have the sites to do so. But anyway, only a mix, in our point of view, will be able to answer demand, to respond the demand in the future. Just to finish, I would like to say that Mazen is ready to share our 10 years experience with all our friends in MENA and African regions. And now Mazen had about 21 agreements signed with African and MENA companies, or even sometimes some governments. And we are happy to share, and we are happy to allow everybody to learn from to give what we have learned during these last 10 years. Thank you very much, and we'll be happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdurrahim. Thank you very much for sharing the huge amount of learning that Morocco has had from its 10 years of CSP experience, and the fact that you are sharing that learning with a number of countries that you just showed us on the map in different parts of Africa, North and Sub-Saharan Africa. And the one particularly key piece of learning that you mentioned from the first CSP tender, where you found the first and second CSP tenders, where you found that more storage hours get much cheaper, that you have economies of scale in storage. And I think the Dubai CSP project demonstrates that very, very strongly, where they have up to 15 hours of storage, and that helped to reduce the tariff, reduce the price very much. That's an important piece of learning to share. Let me pass to our last presenter, Asma Dakwani from STEG in Tunisia. Asma, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself and about STEG, and then go ahead with your presentation. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. But if panelists want to answer the questions that are coming in, if they want to answer them in text form in the Q&A box, that would also be helpful. Asma, please go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Could you hear me? Yeah? Okay. So I am Asma Dakwani. I am the project coordinator of CSP within STEG. So STEG is the national utility company of electricity and gas in Tunisia. And actually, technically talking in the field of electricity, it's the TSO and the off-taker with the IPPs. And so a part of that, our three main tasks on a national level is the electrification, the production of electricity, and the gas supply for consumers. So today, firstly, thank you for the World Bank and the ATA for all this logistics and organization. It's really great. I will try to be quick, as I am the last one, and I guess everybody's tired. So I will be mostly focusing, next slide, please. So I will be mostly focusing on the outcomes of the technical assistance that we got from the World Bank through the MENA CSP KEEP program. And I will focus on the main results, the recommendations, and the insights, which are more or less the next steps to carry on with. Next step. So this is a really general presentation about the framework in Tunisia that my colleague from the ministry today in the morning has already presented. So actually we have a national energy deficit, and this is due primarily to the decrease in the national production of fossil fuels and the significant increase of the demand. So this increase in the demand is primarily reflected with the improvement of standard living and the standard living. So annually we have a 4% demand increase and more than 5% in the peak capacity during the last decade. So the government has decided to go into renewable energies, which was reflected and mentioned in 2013 through a national dialogue, and after in 2015 with the COP21. So renewable energies is considered as a compulsory solution in Tunisia, and it's not a choice anymore. Especially that we are an importer of fossil fuels. So we have went with like four perspective, let's say visions. The strategic one where we have set out our target of achieving 30% in terms of renewable energies electricity production by 2030. The regulatory, we have set out specific regulatory framework to boost and deploy also private investments in renewables. And we have launched the Tunisian solar plan, which will be updated, with which we're updated soon, maybe in May 2015, and as well as the manuals and the guides for all interested investors to bid. And technically, so, and this is specific to STEG, so we are working on the grid upgrade, so with the reinforcement of the capacity of absorption, and with the optimization of technical measures to assure a best integration and absorption of renewable energies. Next slide, please. So, this is how MENA CSP has been going on in Tunisia. So we actually, even in the legal framework, there is 4 defined types of technologies or renewable energies. So there is the classic ones, the wind and the PV, and there is the CSP and the biomass. So we have started on the first the first step until the horizon 2022 with the classic renewables, and from 2022 to 2030 we will work on more the let's say the dispatchable renewable energies. So CSP, one amongst these technologies, so it represents many advantages technically and strategically as well. So we wanted to answer a few questions about CSP, and that's what MENA CSP team tried to help us and to assist us technically to answer these questions. So at which cost, and is it competitive comparing to the other technologies implemented and to implement in Tunisia? What is the profitability of a CSP project, and about also contractual scheme for the share of risks between the public sector and the private sector. So next step, please. Yeah, so in this graph, we have tried to summarize all the actions that has been going on with the MENA CSP KEEP in Tunisia. So there is 2 main kinds of activities. So we have the cross-cutting actions and the specific actions. So for the cross-cutting actions, we have worked more on the reinforcement of capacity building through trainings, technical visits, communication, and raising awareness. For the specific studies, so they were primarily like, so the consultants, of course, Ernst & Young and Fraunhofer working on it, and the World Bank, and also the Tunisian authorities presented by STEG, the Ministry in charge of Energy, and the INME, the Energy Conservation Authority, and also the Ministry of International Cooperation. So primarily, we have focused on the technical aspects for technological configuration and prospective analysis and potential site identification. We have also the economic and the financial evaluations, and also more like as strategic aspects through the analysis of contractual scheme overview, and lastly, the identification of next steps. So let's check together the main results that we have obtained. So in the prospective analysis, we have identified a CSP development program. So the graph, I mean, is really illustrative. And so between, we will have from 2020 to, for a horizon from 2020 to 2035, we will have around like 600 to 1,800 megawatt. And the optimum CSP capacities would be with high storage hours, around 12 hours. So we have also concluded that with the modeling of the electricity system on a long-term perspective, so once we set the constraint of 30% of renewables by 2030, the whole cost of the global cost of electricity production will go higher than letting the model optimizing freely. So, and more than that, the CSP integration and renewable energy integration this way can participate to a high decrease in natural gas consumption, especially that it is the primary source for electricity production. And as it has been presented by many other panelists today, so the PV solution with battery storage is not as competitive than CSP within the electricity mix in Tunisia. So next step, please. So this was the macro level. In the micro level, so we have concluded that the public contracting scheme, like under the EPC, so it's the less costly one. So, but however, even like within the inquiry that has been launched with the international donors, it has been shown that the private scheme is more attractive. This is for the share due primarily to the share of and the transfer of risk between the public and the private sector. So and the most advantageous combinations have been recorded for the parabolic trough for the case of Tunisia with large capacities. So like around 400 megawatt, and this capacity has been like primarily been identified with the availability of land, which is in the south of Tunisia, where there is the highest potential of DNI, and a storage around 7 to 10 hours. And here you have the different financial and economic values. So we are at 7.3 cents USD per kilowatt hour. So this value, I guess, and I am making the conclusion now, based on the presentation that we have so far today, that in a more or less a similar climate as the one in Tunisia, so we can achieve even like 5 and 4 cents per kilowatt hour. And with the, no, I'm still in that slide, sorry. And so like if we go with a review of this LCU value, probably the grid parity will occur. But currently with the 7.33 or 8 or almost 9 cents USD per kilowatt hour, we don't have a grid parity yet. So let's move to the next slide, please. So in regard to the socio-economic impacts, so of course CSP could lead to a really high job opportunities in the temporary and the permanent horizon. And the most companies that they will benefit are the tertiary sector for services, studies, and engineering, financial, insurance, the construction, of course, with the civil engineering works, the electricity components and cable industry, and also the reinforcement of skills that can be positioned strategically beyond the Tunisian market on an international level. So next step, please. Yeah. So really, this is the general, super general recommendations that we come out with from the technical assistance, but I mean, it's really rich and we have learned a lot. So actually, like the LCU could be up to 20% lower when we leave the choice open to bidders on the optimization of the choice of technology and the combination of the technologies like PV and CSP. And in case it's a hybrid solution, so like the way how PV production will be used. For international donors, of course, that the private-based contract scheme looks to be more competitive, but this has been like discussed based only on the contractual scheme that has been applied so far, which is the IPP scheme, so or the EPC scheme, the public like power plants implemented by the public organization. However, we have other regulatory frameworks settling up the application of the public-private partnership, where the participation and the implication of the public organization, which is a STEG in this case, could be more beneficial with an equilibrium of the share of risks. So more than that, we also have learned that in order to satisfy the planning that has been set, so and to implement, let's say, for example, a power plant in 2026, we have to start working on it from now and launching the call since 2021. This takes a lot of time because of the process, which is based on 2 call of tenders, and also for the measurements and all the technical activities and actions that they have been carried out in first. So the competitiveness of CSP, or even because we have checked that as well, the dispatchable solar technology, so let's say, for example, PV with battery storage, within the electricity system in long-term horizon should be verified. So actually, why I am saying that? Because also with the drop of oil prices, actually within like 6 months, probably we're gonna see the drop in natural gas prices. And the electricity production in Tunisia is primarily based on natural gas. So all the equilibrium and the electricity mix perspective could change. So, however, this is as an exercise, but the wheeling and the strategic perspective is going into the national objective of reaching 30% of renewables and the implementation of dispatchable renewable technologies. So, as well, a deep legal analysis should cover all sectoral and cross-cutting laws, which will help us in identifying the share of and the transfer of risks, and also the different financial mechanisms that we are eligible to, and to decrease for sure the LCO. Next slide. So in regard to the insights, so our objective is to better accelerate investments in dispatchable solar energy in Tunisia. So taking into consideration the new worldwide challenges, as I mentioned it, for the drop of fossil fuel prices, and also the trends of the evolution of technologies. Probably they would be impacted by the current situation of the COVID-19. So this could be achieved by filling up the knowledge gaps in innovative solutions, and linking also projects to funding sources and technical and legal advice. So a sustainable strategic way to do it is actually like all the actions that should be carried out within the different public or with international donors, and the synergies should be like all the actions should be complementary. So the favorable, okay, so once these actions are complementary, so we will create a favorable environment, which is based primarily on the planning of electricity at low cost, and diversifying possible transparent and sustainable contractual scheme. So we have the choice with which way we go for, and of course keep going with the reinforcement of capacities, which will help later on in minimizing risks as well. So, and adapt to the current situation of the state budget reallocation, because, and this is, I guess, the situation that is going on with all the countries, where now, like, the government are mainly focusing on the healthcare. So we will try to fund out a win-win public-private partnership scheme that assure a sustainable public service and create a novel economic dynamics with the private sector. This is it. So next slide, if you want. Okay, thank you for your attention. I hope I was quick and I didn't took too much, and I am open for questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Asma. That was great. Let me just get some guidance from Jonathan or from Belen, whether we have time for one or two questions.
Jonathan, I will allow 2 questions.
You're very kind. Thank you, Belen. Okay, so there are a number of questions in the Q&A box, and maybe some of the panelists would like to give answers in writing, because we don't have enough time for all of them. But 2 questions. One is, there's a question to Abderrahim about Morocco, about the job creation, the employment creation implications of CSP. How many jobs have you managed to create, because you've done CSP on quite a large scale, and what are the lessons for other countries? Maybe Abderrahim, if you want to just briefly answer that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Of course, there was a lot of creation of works during the construction. I don't remember exactly the numbers, so I am sorry to not be able to give the exact numbers. I know that more than 90% of them were Moroccan, and at least 20 were from the region, and the region could not give more workers to the project, because it was really a great project. During operation, the project will, the Noorwarzazat will be operated by about 400 people permanently during at least 25 years in a little city of 50,000 people, which is very, very high also. I hope that it answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. One last question. So I think this is really for Murad from Jordan, although it applies in a number of countries, but let's pose it to Murad. There are 2 or 3 questions in the Q&A box about CSP with storage compared to conventional generation in Jordan, particularly gas-fired generation. Looking at the cost, where CSP seems to compare quite favorably, depending on your assumptions. And of course, CSP uses your own sunshine, and the gas in Jordan always comes from somewhere else, is always imported. Do you want to just briefly comment on
yes, for sure.
some of those questions?
Yeah, I mean, here the comparison, I mean, if we wanted to do the comparison perfectly, the comparison maybe would be what would be the best technology to expand in Jordan. I mean, not a technology versus a combination of other technology. It is not, for example, CCGT versus a combination battery plus PV, for example. As we said before, I mean, the country is nowadays exercising plenty of excess energy. And this is clearly shown in the operational study. I showed some slide from the CHESI, which is one of the international lead companies or consultancy services firm. So we have, yes, this plenty energy. I mean, so here the comparison would be, I mean, whether to have this energy as curtailed energy, leave it and curtail it, or seize the the power, or I mean to invest with some of the storage, like the pump hydro storage or the battery storage, I mean, in order to utilize these curtailed energy.
Thank you very much for the answer. Let me now draw this great panel to a close. If we were all sitting in the same room together, I would ask for a very big round of applause for the panelists. So I think in these circumstances, we'll have a virtual round of applause. Ah, Belen is actually applauding. Because that was a very rich set of presentations about the experience and the plans in four MENA countries. I think we all learned a lot from that. So thank you very much. And let me draw that session to a close and hand it back to Jonathan.